Next up, Santana talking about hacking non-traditional systems.
All right. I guess before I get started, I will define what I consider non-traditional systems. Basically, when you look at devices that are connected to the network that aren't your typical, like, here's a monitor, here's a keyboard and a mouse kind of system, those are what I consider non-traditional systems. Those things are like self-checkout units, kiosks, whatever, like random directory listings for hotels on the wall, like these things that aren't seen as computers but are connected to your network and, if hacked, would give direct access to your internal network. So I'll be using that. I guess I'm trying to standardize this umbrella term. So who am I? I'm an independent security researcher because I like to break things in my free time. I'm a security consultant at Accuvant Labs because I like to get paid to break things. I'm a newbie hardware hacker. I have like very bare minimum, I guess, electrical engineering skills. I didn't go to school for it or anything. I'm just kind of picking it up as I go. You may have seen me tweet or something on Twitter. I'm at HackTalkBlog, and if you've seen me on the internet on IRC or something, I'm Connection. I was probably trolling. So what's the point? The basic point of this talk is that physical security sucks, and it leads to the downfall of pretty much every one of these non-traditional systems, because just by their very nature they allow user interaction, and so you've got that physical access to it, and we all know that that tends to make things very bad for the end product. So here's the big problem. Physical security is pretty bad. Here's a photo that was taken. If you look, I guess it's a little dark. Basically, it's a locked box, and then right next to it, hanging on this like really weird wire that looks kind of like wire tubing, like wire insulation tubing, is the key. And apparently that key was there for quite some time, and it was just kind of the normal thing. And accessible USB ports. There's really no reason why you should ever let consumers plug things into your machine, and yet I see it all the time. It's a really big issue. So physical security. The physical security on a bunch of devices is pretty rudimentary. It's often a second thought, and sometimes it's completely non-existent. I've seen things where it kind of looks like a lock, but it's just a latch, and if you lift up, it opens up, and you've got access to like cash boxes and like random fun good stuff like that. I've seen like those really bad cabinet locks on things that are supposed to be protecting stuff, and just like you blow into them and you pick the lock kind of thing. And it really just feels like it's a second thought. Like they'll build the whole machine, they make it look nice and pretty, and then they're like, oh, let's slap a lock on there just for good measure, which never a good idea. So there's one thing that's really fun about attacking these kinds of systems. These devices often share a lot of the same vulnerabilities, and that's for a number of reasons. First of all, there's only a few manufacturers that are either making the software or the hardware itself for these non-traditional devices. And so let's say you find a vulnerability in XYZ's product. Oftentimes, you can take that same vulnerability and apply it to every other product made by XYZ, and because they're just doing code reuse, you're going to find the same issue. A lot of the bugs are highly trivial. Think like, I mean, if you want to go like exploit dev-wise, it's like all classic buffer overflows. A lot of this stuff runs on like Windows XP, so there's no stack protections or anything. There's a lot of plain text communication going on, both on the hardware and software levels, so some interesting attack vectors there. It's easy as pie, like I was saying. These things are highly trivial. I mean, I've seen things ranging from boxes being vulnerable to 08067 to just like it's actually a Windows 95 box, and clicking cancel lets you log in as the admin. It's not rocket science at all. Old techniques on new devices, like I was saying, I've seen 08067. That's a pretty old bug. I'm sure a lot of you guys know of it. Clicking cancel on a login, I mean, that's not even really hacking. I felt dirty when I was like, I got admin by clicking cancel. I think that's a vulnerability. Oh my god, O-Day. A lot of people like having cool little O-Days, and I mean, you'll find really dumb things on this that are spread out through tons of devices, and it's an easy way to start racking those O-Days up, and you don't need any electrical engineering skills. I still kind of stuck with the soldering iron. I should probably never engineer any electronics in my life, but just learning some basic concepts helps you get down if you're going to tinker with devices on a hardware level. And so being able to solder stuff and being able to identify components, and it'll help you out in the end if you're going to get that deep with it. Speaking about hardware, I was talking about plain text communications. So a lot of the devices speak really standard serial protocols like I2C, UART, they've got JTAG and SPI. They're like just common industry stuff for electronics. This little device right here is the coolest $30 I have ever spent. It's called the Bus Pirate, and it's basically like an Arduino styled interface that allows you to communicate with serial protocols. So you plug this into your computer, and then you've got like JTAG pins that you can hook to the other device and stuff. You can solder directly onto it, and it's got a bunch of really cool features. One of my favorite is if you're interfacing with I2C and you get all the wires in the right spots. They actually have this thing called, I think they call it the keylogger. It's a macro. Oh no, it's a sniffer. It's a macro, and you basically press like M and then 1, and it sniffs everything coming through that I2C channel. So if for whatever reason they have a completely separate piece of hardware that's doing encryption on data, and it passes through the I2C along the way, bam, you just sniff that out, plain text right on the hardware level. Really fun stuff. I recommend if you're interested in hardware hacking, even if it's outside the realm of this, I would pick up the Bus Pirate. It's $30, dirt cheap, and you'll get a lot of fun out of it. So the first kind of systems I'd like to talk about are kiosk-like systems. So this is kind of how I define kiosk-like systems. They're often touchscreen, USB for the win. I don't think I've ever seen any kiosk that didn't have USB somewhere. They typically run as local administrator, which is fun because as soon as you break out of that kiosk interface, you're already admin. The hard part's done for you. Drop your tools and have fun. Like 90% of the time, they're going to have hidden menus that once you find either have no authentication, really bad authentication, or you can try the normal defaults like 1, 2, 3, 4 and log in. Super easy to break out of these kiosk systems. You could do funny things like my methodology for testing these things. I call it the kitty cat methodology. I don't know how many of you guys own cats, but one of the ways they show affection is by like massaging you, kind of like this motion. So I walk up to these kiosks and I just like start bashing everywhere, and sometimes even doing that is enough to break it. Doing sequences really fast can cause it to have an error and crash the program. So bashing everywhere really fast can sometimes break it, or just doing weird unexpected things like if you find that pressing a button opens a login menu, try to open a login menu and cancel at the same time, and just do that really fast, and it'll freak out often and crash you right out. If you've got USB access, plug in a USB keyboard. 9 times out of 10 really stupid breakouts are going to work. You can do like Alt F4 or like Control W, you're gonna like break right out of there. Pressing F1 often invokes like Microsoft's built-in help, and you can run command line tools from there. You can invoke cmd.exe and then just kill the process. So it's like really trivial. It's not very difficult to break out of these things. They're often Windows XP, Service Pack 0 to be more exact. Just terrible. The few times I haven't seen them be Windows XP, I've seen them be OpenSUSE. I've seen them be some weird like custom Debian build. I've seen them be Windows Embedded, which is really fun because it has no sense of file permission, so you've got access to the entire file system, and that's always good stuff. And a lot of them Pixie boot, which makes a lot of sense because if they're deploying these kiosks throughout their network, it's really smart to just be able to boot off the network and install the operating system. But that's really bad because Metasploit actually has a module which has a malicious Pixie boot image. So as soon as you reboot the kiosk by like ripping out the power and plugging it back in, it'll see the Pixie boot image up on your attacking machine, boot into it, and allows you to get like local administrator access on there. It creates a user account for you. So really easy. That one's really flashy to show off, especially to clients, because you're like, hey, watch this. I'm going to reboot your box and own you. And it's really just that simple. You reboot it, owned. They've got so accessible USB ports. USB ports should always be hidden. Customers should never plug into your device. Don't leave things. That's a keyboard. on top of an UPS that was plugged into a self-checkout unit that had all the other USB ports locked down, but because there's a little latch, you could lift it up, and the field tech decided, well, if I leave my keyboard here, I won't have to deal with it in the future. And I used that to break out and own the self-checkout. That was really fun. I did that live, like, while customers were walking by. It was really cool to look at the weird stares I was getting. So someone had to make me look bad. Someone actually found a legitimate reason to have USB ports on their device. I saw this at an airport. Basically, you pay money, and it lets you download movies, and when you put it in your flash drive, it puts them right onto your flash drive for you. I felt really stupid because right after giving this talk at another convention, someone said, well, what about those things at that airport? And as soon as I walked up, I said, oh, someone has a business case for this. That being said, I contacted these people and I was able to test this machine, and sure enough, those USB ports were their downfall. I also like how they're right next to the credit card scanner. I'm like, hey, there's a huge security fail right next to your credit card scanner. Vending machines. So we all know about like the classic like Coca-Cola debug code thing, like 4231. You get into the debug menu, you can see how much sales they've made and see if it's a good target to knock up and just steal their cash box or something. I don't know. It used to be that you could reset prices for things, but Coca-Cola was like, hey, people are posting about our debug code on the internet. We should probably stop like having those flags set by default. So now the debug menu's pretty crippled. Limited security, especially physical security. I mean, it's usually like a 7-pin tubular lock. You could buy a tubular lock pick for a couple bucks. Pick these things pretty easily. Those things give you access to a plethora of things. I mean, you've got access to the coin box if you're so inclined. You have access to the internal guts. I've seen some vending machines that are actually just like a tower inside of the machine shell. So you could like steal that and run away with it or plug something into it. If you've got like a USB rubber ducky or something, you could plug that in, have it execute your payload. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. And there's no like encrypted swipe. So when you swipe your credit card, it's not encrypted on the swiper. It's encrypted somewhere else on hardware, which, as I said earlier, you could potentially sniff, or it might get sent over. Vending machines often communicate over either Wi-Fi or CDMA, and so it might get encrypted when it hits their actual payment gateway. So it's unencrypted traveling along their network or the internet or the airwaves, whatever, until it hits that gateway, and then it says, oh, we should probably encrypt this credit card information. So it allows for some sniffing attacks, some man-in-the-middle attacks. I have personally sniffed stuff out of Wi-Fi before, coming off of a vending machine while on an engagement. I had a test credit card, swiped it through, I saw my information. It was both cool and scary. I will probably never swipe my credit card in a vending machine again, and I hope you guys don't. I don't trust them. But, so vending machines aren't just 4231 anymore. There's a bunch of fun things you can do. I actually found this picture up on the internet. It explains, like, really weird error handling by this Coca-Cola machine, and it allows you to basically get buy one, get one free. The basic steps are you put your money in, you pick the drink you want, and then that little green flap that looks like a soda, you can push that down or push it out depending on the model. And so as soon as you pick your soda, you push that down or push it out and hold your hand against this like plastic flap that it's got. And when you do that, the machine is going to move, and it's going to basically try to open up the latch because it's got a latch that opens outward. And it would open perfectly if there was a soda in there. But so when it gets down there and it's not able to open it, it thinks, oh man, I must have not grabbed the soda. I think we're out of that soda. And so it moves all the way down to the bottom, thinks for a second, and then it goes, okay, make another selection. So when you make it, it gets pushed out and both sodas end up like stacking. It can sometimes fail. It goes terribly wrong when it does because soda everywhere. But
not that you tried this or anything?
I've seen YouTube videos. And so it's hilarious though because in a perfect world it like stacks perfectly. It goes to open it up. The first soda comes out and then you yank it out really quick and then the second soda comes out. And you just buy one, got one freed. Your favorite soda or soft drink or water or whatever you're inclined to drinking. So there's like weird bugs like that where their error handling should have been, it should check for quantity left and be like, no, I know there's a soda in there. I'm not gonna fall for this trick, you dirty hacker. and like just wait for you to move your hand. But they decided instead, hey, if we can't lift this flap, there must have not been a soda. I don't know why they decided on that. I hope they patch that, or maybe not. Hacking can be delicious. I've hacked ice cream machines. I've hacked these cool like cappuccino and hot chocolate machines. That was a great day, like coffee all day for free. Good stuff. Om nom nom chicken nuggets. That's bad. So we've got a story time now, and this is the device that cried SQLI. So I work with the local university a lot, and I test their security and have a bunch of fun times with that. Pretty close with their CERT team. There's a device on campus though that is like a directory service thing. You've seen them a lot in the hotels. They'll be mounted on the wall, and they tell you, hey, here's the events that are going on, and blah blah blah, points of interest. If you were at DerbyCon, those were the giant things mounted on the wall. Yeah, so they had a similar device, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I was looking at one of these at DerbyCon. I want to poke around with this more. So, long story short, after attaching a network tap inline, me and some buddies discovered that the device was calling out to a web server in a GET request to a PHP file, and it was like, ID is equal to 1. And so instantly I thought, SQL injection. So yeah, put the tick in there, bam, get the error. So then, one thing led to another, database dump. All the passwords are plain text, really, really bad. At this point, I'm like, I need to tell the vendor about this because I've got their admin and password. But before I do it, I know that sometimes vendors want a lot of proof. So I went a little further. Turns out the admin user has access to do a bunch of really fun stuff, like push out remote updates to all 50,000 of its directory kiosk things, instant botnet. It also had access to full source code. I mean, it was really bad, like intellectual property, the whole 9 yards. I let them know about it. Nothing happened. Let them know about it again. Nothing happened. That was about 6 months ago. It's still vulnerable. Their source code is still out on the internet on a public, on an anonymous read and write FTP server. It's just not a good time for this company, and they don't seem to care.
Is the botnet there?
What was that?
Is the botnet there?
No, I didn't actually install. Let me just be clear. I did not install anything malicious on these boxes. I simply saw that I could push updates and was like, this would be really bad had I been a bad guy. Yeah. So, some of their source code that shows really badness, it gives access to, it tells you their full FTP server, username and password to the user that's allowed to push to the updates folder, which is where all devices pull their updates from. Really bad. They were kind enough to be like, hey, here's all the default folders and fun stuff. SQL Server login info. That was really fun. I let them know about that one for sure. It doesn't work anymore, so at least they patched that. The default passwords on all these devices. User pin is 1234. No one will ever guess that. The admin pin is 1196, which is, I guess, a little more creative, but still pretty bad. I've tested the admin pin on a bunch of different directories as I travel around into different hotels, and it works at least like 70% of the time. So if you ever see a directory on a TV and you want the admin menu, 1196. So here's the device in question. This is the secret hidden menu thing. Basically, if you bash on the upper left-hand corner, this pops up. The 1196 password did not work in this case, so I was like, what can I do? I want to crash this thing. So I decided I was going to do a bunch of things to try to break out of the kiosk software, but I ended up in front of this screen instead. Basically, I have to see if it's only this particular model or in their entire product line. There exists a race condition which allows for auth bypass, and it's a really stupid race condition, and I only discovered it because I got mad at the machine. If you if you invoke this login menu and then press cancel and then do it at the same time again, it involves a lot of timing. You get used to it eventually, but it's basically invoke, cancel, press them both at the same time. You get to this screen. The different numbers correspond to different functions. I didn't really know what I was looking at. I was like, okay. So I decided to press 5. Now, this is a conference room, by the way. Now I could be like, hey, this room is way too hot, put down the AC. Or I could say, hey, this room is way too cold, put up the heater. I could ask for AV assistance, unlock the conference room, or lock it, order food and beverages, or have the room refreshed, whatever. So it was actually pretty fun to go around. I tested this throughout the entire hotel and was able to unlock every conference room and then relocked it again. I was at a company retreat and decided to troll a couple people, so I said, you know, it's really way too hot in here. Let's turn down that temperature. And I got it down to the minimum, which was like, I think like 65 degrees. So pretty big shift. I didn't get to go back into the other menus because the hotel staff got mad at me. I don't know why. But yeah, they were a little upset. So next time I see one of these, I want to see what the menus like 1 through 9 do, omitting 5, of course. I can only imagine it's a bunch of really fun stuff like updating the flight data or the maps or something. I've been looking over the source code. It's all in C#. There's a bunch of craziness in there. I don't know. It was pretty interesting to find that race condition. If you look, there's also a cursor. I didn't take pictures because I guess I completely forgot to. Shortly after this, I actually crashed the app by trying to do the race condition again. The app crashed because I guess it was like, hey, you're logged in. Why are you trying to log in? And then bad things happened to memory. It crashed, and I was able to launch a command prompt shortly after that. Again, it was running as local administrator, all that fun stuff. They had a completely flat network, so I could hit all their stuff on their internal network. It was pretty interesting. Then I told the hotel, hey, listen, you've got this bug, and I reported it to the vendor. They weren't listening to me, but if you yell at them, maybe they'll fix it. It still hasn't been fixed.
Did they throw you out?
They did not throw me out. They just told me not to do it anymore, or they were going to throw me out. And I was in Denver. I did not want to get thrown out. It was way too cold for that. So what's next? I'm still trying to research this a lot because it's kind of an umbrella term, like non-traditional devices. So that's like everything that's not a computer that's connected to your network. It's a huge like area. I mean, I even consider stuff like that car hacking stuff that was done. That stuff is crazy. Like Apple TVs. There's refrigerators that are connected to the network and stuff. Like all that stuff is. It's technically within this sphere, this umbrella term that I've created, and I just kind of want to hack it all. I want to do some like I want to do some voting machines and all that fun stuff. See if I can pick our next president or something. Working with vendors, I learned through like that thing with the directory kiosk that vendors kind of suck and they don't always listen to you, and that comes over from like even disclosing traditional vulnerabilities to like software vendors and such, but. Man, these hardware guys really suck because they're like, you expect me to push out like updates to all these kiosks? Yeah, not gonna happen.
But they've got the API to do so. Well, he's got the too.
Well, you saw what happened with the door lock that with the what's its name plan where they just they didn't update that till it made national news and it was covered by CNN. Right. And then, even then, their first thing was like, the hotels have to pay. And then the hotels were like, hell no.
Yes. So the comment made was that, I mean, this has been going on even for things like hotel door locks where you can, like, stick in a pin and bypass a door lock. And the hotels had known about it for a while, and they didn't really decide to patch anything until it made national news. And then the vendor was still like, well, the hotel's got to deal with that because it's their issue, not ours. So yeah, working with vendors is, I think, always going to be a painful process. It's something that I guess you just have to get used to. I'm working on methodologies because, like I said, I have the kitty cat methodology. I don't think that's actually a thing. I think I just look like a creeper when I'm doing that or something. But I'm working on some methodologies. I'm starting to break devices into classes like Kiosk-Like Systems and Vending Machines and ATMs and yada yada yada, so that I can create flow charts or decision trees so that you can get a pretty comprehensive assessment of whatever you're looking at. Again, it's difficult because there's this huge umbrella term, and I'm sure I'm not going to cover every non-traditional device, but I'm aiming for the whole 80-20 rule. As long as I can get the gist of things, it'll be all right. Funding. It's actually extremely expensive to get a lot of these things. I looked into buying an actual kiosk. Pretty expensive. I ended up just getting a trial version of the software and putting it into VMware. It was much more cost effective, but some things, if I want to test an ATM, I can't really just find ATM, an ISO to an ATM operating system or something. I'd have to buy an ATM, which are surprisingly pretty much as expensive as the money in them, I guess. So it's hard to get access to all the devices, so I always welcome donations. I'll even do assessments for free if I can poke around at your stuff. Toolkits. Along with methodologies, I'm working on some toolkits so that if you get access to a kiosk, it'll have a bunch of tools you could drop onto there and have a bunch of fun stuff. Basically taking traditional post-exploitation into these non-traditional systems and allowing you to legitimately compromise networks by owning someone's directory thing on the wall. It's difficult because there's a wide range. These things will run on ARM processors sometimes they're Intel processors. So just that architecture alone could throw off a lot of the tools. And I haven't done a huge amount of research into these where I can be okay, well, on the 100 assessments I've done on these, I've needed XYZ tools. So every time I do an assessment, I find myself needing another piece of hardware, or I need another I would want another piece of software. So it's difficult, and also along that same route, you kind of have to start bringing weird hardware with you. You need to bring a keyboard with you for those USB ports, a mouse, a USB hub, because sometimes there's only one USB port. Having USB flash drives is always needed as well, so you can drop tools on there or take information off. Network taps, because in case you can't get on the same network address as it, at least you could sniff the information in leaving or coming in. So every time I go, I'm man, I need something else. I was on an assessment where I needed a screwdriver because they didn't have any actual locks. They just had a single screw holding on the front plate to all the guts. So it's kind of weird. I'm still learning what I should bring. I'm considering just making a backpack full of all the tools I have and just randomly bringing them with me, soldering iron. Yeah, I got that. That's also something I've run into, having to make tools on the fly. Sometimes I'm just I would really, really like a serial to USB sniffer, but I don't have one. So I have to strip wires with my teeth, and it's just not a fun time, and twist wires. So I always bring my soldering iron with me now. And it's kind of a new market. I'm hoping to expand this, similar to what happened in mobile security. A couple people decided, hey, we're going to hack some phones, and now there's huge. I think every assessment company out there now is oh yeah, we'll audit your mobile device or your mobile app, and it's really taken off. And I hope to do the same thing because I would like to feel safe in my house, and I don't want my refrigerator to tell me that it won't give me my sandwich. So, does anyone have any questions on anything, I guess?
Have you grabbed any firmwares off some of the stuff you've played with?
Okay, so that was my initial reason for buying the Bus Pirate, so that I could steal some firmware.
Need to repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, have I ever grabbed any firmware off the devices that I've been testing? And yeah, so I bought the Bus Pirate with the intent of, hey, I'm going to steal firmware. What I learned was that clients usually aren't receptive to, hey, let me steal your secret sauce. So if anyone has any firmware dumps of these things, I'd love to look over them and find some OS level bugs and get some cool stuff. If I could own vending machines remotely with a buffer overflow, that would be amazing. That being said, if I ever do get the okay to dump some firmware, I'll start up a GitHub repository with a bunch of firmware images so that people can download them and look at them and try to find some bugs alongside me. Any other questions? Can't see all the way to the back. All right. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, here's my contact info. Feel free to hit me up whenever. I'd love to talk, especially if you've done similar research. And just as some thanks, I'd like to thank Accuvant Labs for letting me come out, and thank Patrick for letting me hack my first thing, and you for coming here and listening to me babble for about 40 minutes. Thanks.